the code is back, so I got to put on one of my favorite jackets for today's video. I had 0 ideas for the intro. In the last video, I showed how to get your kick to hit at the same dB it was before the plugins, but sound louder and bring out the perceived loudness. A lot of you were interested in that, so today I want to focus on getting that to happen with different plugins. So we're going to use a few different limiters, a few different clippers, and I threw in Decapitator to get a saturation plugin in there. And they're all set, ready to go. And I kind of just want to show you how you can get your kicks to hit harder but stay at the same volume that they were at before you add any plugins. There's a whole bunch of different plugins you can use. I brought up FL Limiter, I brought up L1, then I got G Clip, which I used in the last video. We got Decapitator, and we got JST Clip. If you guys want me to use different plugins in a future video, I will do it as well. But I just want to showcase this technique with a whole bunch of different plugins. So they're already ready, set up. I'm going to show you how I did it. But first, what we need to do is bring up a loudness meter so we can see what our true peak is at. So you could tell that every time I add a plugin, we'll stay at the true peak or very, very close. Like I think some of these are almost set to negative 8.4 and then kind of dialing it to 8.5. It was bouncing in between, but for the most part, they all hit almost exactly the same true peak. So here's the kick with nothing on it. So you'll see we have a true peak of negative 8.5. If I put this first limiter on, we're going to stay very close to that. 8.4. And I'm going to go over all these, but I'm just showing you. The next one, 8.4. You can already hear it sounding louder, right? 8.4 with G-Clip, then Decapitator. Let's hear it. 8.5. That one stayed the same. And let's go for JST Clip. 8.6. So the kick leveled with no plugins, as you can see, was hitting at negative 8.5, and it sounds good, right? But in the last video, I talked about getting your kick to sound louder while staying at the same dB that you were originally at. So in order to do that, let's bring up the Fruity limiter. So I didn't mess with attack or release on any of these. I kept them just as is because we can go into that in another video and talk about that separately. But since a couple of these, like for instance, G-Clip or JST Clip, Decapitator, don't necessarily have that, for the limiters, I just kept them as is. So since we're at negative 8.5 dB before the plugin was on, all we have to do is come over to our ceiling if I reset this, and we bring this down to negative 8.5, so we stay very close. And then after you can adjust it, if you look at the top left corner, it's going. So that's negative 8.5 right there. And then for the gain, I went and pushed into the limiter by about 4 dB. So this is reset to 0. And if we bring this up about 4 dB, what that means is we're going to push into the limiter by 4 dB. We're going to cause it to do 4 decibels of gain reduction. And that's what I have set up on all of these, and I'll explain it as we go. So real quick, because this might confuse you later, this limiter and the gain, we're pushing it up. But on this one, you see there's a threshold, and while we bring it down, the volume kind of gets pushed up into the ceiling. So right here, this ceiling is negative 8.5. As you can see, the out ceiling right here is negative 8.5. And for this, we pushed into the limiter by 4 dB. And here we brought the threshold down to negative 12.5. If you do the math on it, if we hit the threshold at negative 8.5, that's right where the kick's hitting. So we add 4 dB to that, right? And that brings us to negative 12.5. So you'll see on all of these, I'm doing the same amount of gain reduction so that we're getting the same amount of gain reduction, but we're going to be able to hear which one we like that sounds better. So that's all I did for the Fruity limiter, is the out ceiling to negative 8.5, and I pushed about 4 dB of gain in. So let's hear that before and after. And then after. So you're hearing it's kind of keeping it smooth. It's not doing too much. You're hearing it a little bit louder, but nothing too crazy. So I might, for this limiter, want to push it in a little bit more. But since we're doing about 4 dB of gain reduction on all of them, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep this very even so we can kind of just hear the difference. The main part of this tutorial is kind of just to show you the differences in plugins when you're kind of doing the same thing, and you can kind of hear the difference that each plugin, limiter, clipper, saturation kind of does when we're applying the same amount of gain reduction. So if we move on to the L1, this release is set kind of crazy, but I have it on auto release anyway, so this part doesn't matter. If I turned it off, it would. Probably just move that on accident. We can go ahead and reset that. So for this, it's the same thing. We have about 4 dB of gain reduction. If I go ahead and show you right here, right, negative 3.9, very close to 4. Out ceiling is negative 8.5. So we're getting the same gain reduction and the same output level that we did from the last limiter. Let's hear what this one sounds like. Let's hear it by itself. We're applying gain reduction to it with a limiter which has a very high ratio. Technically, what we're doing is pushing up 4 dB into the limiter, but it's keeping us at that same peak. So let's hear that one more time. Now let's hear the other one in solo. So personally, I would probably go with the L1 over the Fruity limiter for this, but every kick's gonna be different. Now let's go over to G clip. So we have these two turned off. G clip, simple setup you've seen in the last video. It's a little bit different. We're going off percentages here, but the clip is brought down to keep the last peak at the same true peak that we had. We're pushing in 4 dB right here. And then I went for like a medium clip on this. I didn't go like a hard clip or a soft clip. I forgot where I was, somewhere in between here. So now you'll see when we turn this on and off, same true peak, but you're gonna hear the kick louder. Let's go ahead and hear it. We can sit here and make it a harder clip or a softer clip. You can mess around with this, but as you can see, we're still hitting that true peak, but we're hearing the kick louder. So as you could tell already, we have 3 different tones that we can select. So like I said, for the main part of this video, I really just want you to be able to see that depending on what you use, you can get different sounds and different tones, but you're applying the same technique. So let's go over to Decapitator. We have Decapitator set up. We have our output set. We're using style T. And let's hear before and after on this. Here's before. And let's hear it in solo. So it kind of adds a little bit of body to it, kind of gets a little bit softer, a little bit warmer. Specific track, I don't like what Decapitator's doing to the kick. I'd probably throw it on the sub instead. I don't use Decapitator on kicks too much, but it does sound good depending on the kick drum you're using. But you could go in here, you can throw punish mode on and then bring the output down and kind of get a different tone if you want. And then we have JST clip. For this, I have ×2 on, and I trimmed it back about -8.6. On the trim, I couldn't get it to hit 8.5. It kept going 8.4, 8.6, so I just left it. But you'll hear what's happening here is we're pushing in, trimming it back. And for this specific one, on how I set it up with ×2 and pushing it in, you can hear that it adds a lot of grit to it. It's a very aggressive clipper. But for the beat, you might like it because it makes it stand out. It adds a little bit of bite at the top end, and it's really, really clipping the signal. So let's go ahead and hear this one before and after. So a bit more aggressive just because of how I used it. I like what it adds to it. I like the grit that it adds. But let's go ahead and hear it in solo. You might like how it sounds in the mix, but maybe in solo, you don't like what it's doing to the kick. Obviously, in the mix is what matters, but let's just hear it in solo right now. So here it is before. And let's refresh this so you can see. So it might be a little too crazy, especially in solo, but in the context of the mix, it doesn't sound too bad. That grittiness kind of gets hidden and it kind of blends in. So let's hear it one more time. Let's go ahead and loop a little bit more so we don't go crazy hearing that same part over and over again. And you can obviously choose different settings for this. You don't have to do ×2, but for this, I wanted to showcase kind of getting that grittiness out of this clipper and adding it in, because in the mix, it could sound good depending on what you're going for. So again, this is all preference. We're doing the same exact thing with all these and getting the final output to be the same so that it doesn't change from the original mix that we have right here. It's peaking at the same true peak as you can see here, but we're getting different tones and all of them are making it sound louder. You could do this with all different types of clippers and limiters, but these are the kind of the ones I just chose for today's video to showcase. If you guys want to see me do this with more limiters so you can hear them, let me know in the comments down below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you did like this video, leave a thumbs up. You can follow me on all social medias at LifestyleDidIt. Make sure to hit my site, lifestyledidit.com, for everything else. Other than that, subscribe to your boy, push notifications. Thanks.